morning and welcome this AI webinar on Skynet or Wally. How is AI changing work for security teams? We're super grateful that you could join. And we have two amazing panelists for our webinar that we're hosting for AI Appreciation Day. We're going to keep this super conversational, no sales pitches or anything like that. If you have questions for myself or any of the panelists, please drop them in chat and we'll try to get to them when we can. Real quick backgrounds for everyone. So I'm Drew, I'm the CTO of Semgrep. My background is I did my undergrad in computer science at MIT, and then for the last 7 years, I've been the co-founder and CTO of Semgrep. We're a code security company. And for the last 3 months, I've been focused on AI and how is it changing our industry. I'll start with Daniel. You want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, my name is Daniel Miesler, and I've been doing security for most of my career, a couple decades. And a few years back, I converted over to full-time building stuff with AI. So that's me.
That's awesome. And we'll see if Jackie is able to join back in. I know she's been having some internet problems, but looks like Jackie's back. Hey, Jackie.
Yes. Hi. Ready for intro?
Sounds great.
Cool. Okay. Hi, I'm Jackie. I have been working in security for around 15 years, mostly in threat detection and response. I've bounced around quite a bit. Currently, I am helping build out our threat detection and response team at Anthropic. Yeah, and I am in the Santa Cruz Mountains right now, so my Wi-Fi is cutting in and out, but excited to be here.
Excited to have you both. Thank you so much for joining. Let's start with the icebreaker. What's an interesting way that you're using AI in your daily life? Jackie, let's start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So I have formed this relationship with Claude, and Claude is our Anthropic's AI. And I have an instance of Claude that I call Claude BT, which is Claude Behavioral Therapy. And it's kind of like having a very, very good therapist in your pocket, because it turns out that CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, which is it's kind of like the cream of the crop of talk therapy, is a lot of things that LLMs are good at. It's a lot of referencing lists of cognitive distortions and other things. So that has been really an uplift in my daily life, I would say.
Awesome. How about you, Daniel?
So myself and a couple of other people put together a framework called Fabric. So it's a command line interface for interacting with AI. So that's my main interface for doing AI stuff.
Nice. I've been using AI to help me figure out how to install programs in Docker files lately, because I can never remember the series of apt-get install. And so I'm always like, hey, I want to install Yarn in this Docker file, paste in the header, and then it fills it out. And 99% of the time it works quite well.
Yeah, that's a great use.
Cool. Well, Jackie, I know you've been thinking a lot about this innovation implementation paradox. Can you tell us more about that and how you're thinking about it?
Yeah, I see that there's this incredible tension and push to adopt AI technologies, but then especially working in security, there's so much that we have to do every day. There's so much foundational work, there's so much response work, that there's this paradox between we want to implement the novel uses of AI, but also we have to do the day-to-day needful of actually doing security work. And even at Anthropic, which is an AI company, internally we struggle with this on how much time do we focus on novel uses of AI versus how much time do we spend doing classical security work. And the areas that we call this Claudification, on how do we introduce Claude into our day-to-day lives. And a really good example of this, Drew, you were talking about kind of using it for the things that you might go to Stack Overflow for, or you might try to troll man pages. It's incredibly fast at that. And I know for me, going from an idea to implementation is cut down maybe 70%. But still, there in the back of my mind is I could reduce or get rid of this whole class of problem if I just had the space to sit down and think about how to use this. I might throw it to Daniel, because Daniel I think you tweeted, even if we stopped AI development right now, We have maybe like, I don't remember how many years you said of like catch up of actually using what we have discovered so far. Like we haven't
Yeah.
even like tapped it yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree with you there. Yeah. Yeah. I think very few people have started implementing the stuff we already have. It's exactly what you said, right? I mean, it would take, I don't, who knows how long it would take, but over a decade probably to fully seep that stuff in with like Sonnet 3.5. By the way, Jackie, I'm waiting on Opus 3.5. So what can you do for me there? That's
You know,
going to be
I'm working.
monumental.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think, what I basically understand what you're saying is that, it's the space is changing so fast that you sort of don't know how much to, just keep doing your daily job and kind of let the AI get better and better and better, versus saying like, okay, I'm going to work through it now and kind of start, bringing it in. Like, do you have an example, maybe on your team where you actually had to think through this paradox?
Mm. Well, I can give some examples where we are finding like really good use so far. We have kind of integrated Claude into the PR process. So say you're working on a feature development and you go to write your PR and you're like, oh God, wait, what was all the things that I did in here? We have a service that will just go and deploy Claude and it will summarize what your PR has, put it into GitHub. And the nice thing too is on the opposite side as a reviewer, if you're looking at a PR and your coworker taps you, it is like, hey, PR has been sitting for 2 days. Can you look at it? And you go and you're like, oh no, there's like this is huge. This is a huge PR. It helps you summarize. You get to clarity much quicker than before, and it also helps you like overwrite some of that cognitive bias of like the things that you would naturally look for. So yeah, Claude for development practices just like speeds us up quite a bit.
That's interesting. We're using LLMs for kind of the security version of that, right? So every time you write code, you scan it with Semgrep, find some bugs. Recently, we've been focusing on like, can you just explain to the developer like, what's this bug? Why does it matter? Maybe how you even fix it. And we're seeing some really incredible results with very basic prompt, but kind of just drawing on the knowledge of the LLM. It's kind of, like you said, gone through and read thousands and thousands of man pages. Daniel, I know you've been thinking about like continuous testing and kind of these like shortening attack windows with AI. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. This is a thing I'm really excited about and worried about from the attacker side is that essentially the way I think about this is you can have like thousands or millions of helpers. And the question is, how good are those helpers? And right now, people are saying, it's a really smart intern or it's bachelor level or whatever. And the scales are kind of strange, but whatever that level is, it's going to get cheaper and cheaper to have more and more of them, right? So let's just say you have 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 of these. And let's say some companies are saying they're going to be PhD level by like 2025. And honestly, I'm not sure. In some cases, they're not already at that level. It depends on the narrow versus broad. But now imagine that they can be looking at a target's attack surface. And not sometimes, not daily, but continuously. It could just be pulling this data constantly and harvesting that data from whatever APIs it can. And it basically never gets tired, never gets sick. It doesn't blink, it doesn't look away. And that will allow attackers to hit you faster. So when somebody accidentally leaves that S3 bucket today or a year ago or 5 years ago, you had a little bit of time before a bug bounty hunter came along. Maybe that was an hour, maybe that was 2 hours, depending on what target you are and how big of a target you are. But maybe that's 3 days. Maybe it sits out there and nothing bad happens because no one ever saw it. The idea of something bad happening in a public way that nobody ever saw is kind of going away because of this. So basically, if you make a mistake, it will be taken advantage of. And the time between the mistake and it being taken advantage of is going to go down significantly. And that means that the defender has to do the exact same thing. They have to be using the exact same techniques. And really this goes back to, okay, attackers are going to pen test you, so you have to pen test yourself. Well, now it's just being massively upgraded with AI and agents. And the time windows on these things are going to go from days and hours, or weeks, days and hours, to hours and minutes. And in some case, seconds, probably.
The concept you're talking there also, like, this sounds like a feedback loop where you have, the AI is kind of learning how to pen test these applications. How does it maybe even fix those and defend against it? And then of course, the model keeps getting smarter, using the learnings it has. I'm curious, Jackie, if you've kind of seen anything in your work where AI has been accelerating this window.
Yeah, I definitely think, we're going to see shortening of windows of both attack and defense. And something that I've been thinking about is how we're going to kind of move up the stack in terms of, like, I think areas that, we have humans mostly in the loop, meaning like bounty, kind of like testing, is going to kind of be replaced more by autonomous agents. And we're going to be moving up the stack in terms of machines are going to be trying to compromise machines, which will be checked by machines, and then there'll be humans in the loop to kind of verify what's going on. But I think we'll see a very different surface of attack and defense in the future.
Yeah, I agree.
We have an audience question, Daniel, around models. Like, how do you sort of find the sweet spot between using kind of organizational, customization versus kind of global world knowledge, that's scraped from the web? How do you think about that when you're kind of attacking and defending?
Yeah. So I would say the large models are going to be vastly better in most cases that I've seen. So I would not personally, at this point in the evolution, put too much effort into trying to train models with better knowledge about vulnerabilities, about your vulnerabilities, unless it's something completely different and strange. But in general, the next jump that comes from a major model upgrade is going to far surpass any work that you went in to trying to lift that bar a little bit. And I would say you should instead focus on your internal knowledge, not trying to make the AI smarter, but trying to give it more and more context about what you do and what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, 1,000% there. Like, one of the hardest things, I think, is giving the context to the model. Because when people critique models and they say, oh, they're not smart enough, they don't, like, it's not that they're not smart enough, it's that they aren't being prompted with the context necessary to give you the answer you're expecting. When we think about training a model, we're training a model on what language, how do you put sentences together, what is like an expected human output. And what Daniel is talking about is like this process of, like, once you have a model, fine tuning it to give you the answers you expect. And I think it's so important. And what we are thinking about a lot internally is, like, how do we give our model access to our entire, like, brain trust of knowledge of people working at our company? Like, how do you give it access to our knowledge bases, our code bases, the like individual knowledge that is harvestable, because then is when you're going to get something that approximates a human. But I think trying to go at, like, oh, I'm going to train this model how to do a very specific thing right now is counterproductive, in the sense that we're still developing these models that have a sense of language. And so I'm on the same page with Daniel.
Do you think there's any possibility that we're going to kind of run out of training data?
Yeah, I feel like you would know more than me, Jackie. You want to go first?
And this honestly is just like me not being, a research scientist. I don't work on our, team that trains our model. But for me, when I think about, we have been training our models on the corpus of human, like, written language to give them a sense of what it is, like, what language is. And I think once you do that, the fact that we are, as humans, are continuing to human and create artifacts and use these systems is going to continue to like fine tune these models. But I think there's confusion in what exactly goes into training a model versus tuning a model versus deploying a model. It's kind of like, it's a little bit of a hype fear of like run out of knowledge. Because what is knowledge really? It's just the output of humans existing.
Yeah. Yeah, I very much agree with that. And I would say this is going to be the time to shine for like data brokers. So data brokers, what they have these companies, and all they do is collect this data from people. And at the same time, we have more cameras going up. So to Jackie's point, like we can go and harvest like all the video that we already have. So we have the point of the past. First of all, we don't have all the audio. We don't have all the video. So we're just starting with collecting everything from the past. But that's not where it ends, because you have this constant stream. You have smart speakers, you have mobile phones, you have all human social media activity. You have anything that's coming into a data broker. And eventually those data brokers are most likely going to have these connections, these legal approved connections with AI companies that allow them to have this constant stream of new user activity. And that's the way I see it going. I don't see us really running out. And at the same time, there's also going to be advances in creating synthetic data. And that could also help as well, assuming it works. But either way, humans are still, like Jackie said, humaning.
We have a couple people asking about how we could use LLMs to leverage a body of threat intel. Daniel, I'm curious for your take on if you've tried to apply threat intel yet to LLMs or not.
Yeah, I have a bit actually. It all comes down to context and giving context to a smart model, right? So just assume the model is smart. And so you basically have a set of goals. The goal is like, I want to avoid these types of vulnerabilities because these are very dangerous for us. And if you see anything like this, definitely flag it to us because we're going to try to remediate within 3 hours. So you could tell the AI that. And then you could say, continue to watch this file to see, and this is a very sort of, I guess, a low rent version of doing this, but continue to watch this file to see if there's any new context that makes you afraid for the current state. And from there, you simply parse from RSS feeds or whatever way to find new threat intel out there, and you add it to the file. And there's a million different ways to do this. You could have it be a RAG, you could have it be just stuffing into context. But you basically say, if you see anything related to log4j or log4j number 2 or whatever it is, it should also know the context of where that's applied and used inside of the company. And it could basically adjust impact based on that and spawn off an alert. And it's just a matter of collecting that threat intel data and making it available as context.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's all about the approach. Like, I wouldn't go to Claude and be like, tell me the attack vectors for the past day for, APT, whatever. Or I would use Claude to be like, okay, you are, a threat intel analyst, and we're building a system that will enrich our log data with threat intel. Here are the pipelines we're going to use. Here are the tools available to you. Something that's incredibly powerful is tool use. So this is giving the models the ability to use a tool, and a tool could be a Python interpreter. It could be, like some kind of like web search functionality. It could be access to a data feed. But you are pretty much allowing the model to get context rather than asking the model from its like memory to tell you about threat data. And I think that's one common pitfall that I see is people think that think that talking model is like the ability to query the real-time internet, but really it's a reasoning machine. It's going to help you figure out how to create pipelines and do what Daniel said of like create your threat intel corpus and then reason about it once you have that corpus available, so you can create the enrichment tools and pipelines to ingest data from feeds from other sources, And then you can use the power of LLMs and like RAG to search over and make meaning. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
love that you brought
Drew,
up
I love this
tools.
question from William here. Can we jump on that one?
Let's do it.
Yeah, so
Oh yeah, this is a great question.
yeah. So William's asking, what about the pipeline? This is something I didn't plan on talking about, but I'm curious Jackie's thoughts here too. So the military watches this pipeline problem very closely. They're like, how many E1s do we have? How many E2s, E3s? Everyone must go through E1, E2, E3, O1, O2, E3. You can't be skipping around. And if you have a problem with E1s, you have a problem with E2s all the way up the chain, right? And one of the worries is that we're going to have really good AI soon, AI agents especially, that can do a SOC tier 1 or tier 2 analyst job. And then everyone's like, oh, good, no problem, because I wanted to be a tier 3 anyway. Well, you get to be a tier 3 by doing tier 1 work and tier 2 work. So the answer to the question, I think, is that platforms will probably or should be doing the work, but also be a pair analyst for a human. So you can have a human come in and get trained, and basically an incident comes in, the AI starts working on it, and it starts talking to the human. Hey, I'm going to look up in Confluence to see if they pulled this. Hey, I'm going to pull this log. Did you pull it? So it's a training platform at the same time that it's executing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's such a great,
I
kind of take on it. And I mean, we've been thinking a lot about how we can use like AI more as like an assistant rather than a replacement. I mean, if you think about the way you
mm-hmm.
learn to write software, right? It's often through things like pair programming, and
Yes.
I think like an interesting area of research is like how do we keep making these LLMs more explainable, because they're not just a magic black box. And I know Jackie Anthropic did some really interesting research recently, I think around the like
Mm-hmm.
Golden Gate paper that we all
Yes,
enjoyed
Golden Gate Glad.
reading here. Yeah. I think I remember asking it like what my favorite or what its favorite kind of ice cream was, and it was like cherry red because the
Because
red
it's red
reminds me
like
of the
Golden.
Golden Gate.
Yes.
Yeah, that was interesting.
um
Uh,
yeah, I think that paper especially was such a really big milestone in understanding interpretability of like what models are doing. I do want to answer this question about the pipeline or add my thoughts, because this is definitely something that is like I think about a lot. I'll first say the pipeline has been funked up for as long as I've been in security. This isn't a problem that is going to be created by AI. I think it's going to be exacerbated for anyone trying to break into cybersecurity, and even people who have been in cybersecurity for a while. Like most jobs are looking for people with experience when we're not offering a lot of ability to get that experience. That aside, I do believe like the path forward is a more kind of like what Daniel was talking about with the military, of like having actual form fronted style programs. But think about especially threat detection response. So much of the work we do, no human should have to do it. It's manual, it's rote. It does not pull on the kind of genius that is a human mind, which is creativity, which is novel thinking. And so I do see the SOC analyst being AI empowered, and like SOC analysts will be able to be 10, 15, 20% more capable. And also the onboarding is going to be so much faster because you're able to kind of have someone in your pocket, especially if that agent or assistant is trained on your company's corpus of data. Yeah, and I do think in the future, like, if we're talking about far future, will jobs that require kind of data analysis be kind of culled or winnowed? Yes. Is that a bad thing? Absolutely not. I think humans can focus more on the things that really actually benefit humanity rather than being, kind of, data collators.
Absolutely agree.
Great discussion there. Jackie, I'm curious when you think how you think about kind of this cognitive chasm of building versus buying, and how do you
Mm,
bridge today's tools with the stuff it feels changing so
yeah.
rapidly. I mean, what we thought was going to
Yeah.
be 5 years is like 3 months.
Yeah, definitely. I felt this especially when I'm talking to vendors now. Like we still have the security space with, you know, um, startups kind of popping up, and we have our Gartner Magic Quadrants, and we're still creating acronyms. But internally, what I'm experiencing is if I can build something, and my ability to build something has now, you know, exceeded what I could have done before having this like LLM assisted world. I'm not going to even think about buying because procurement processes can take upwards of a year sometimes with vendor reviews, which with going back and forth. And a lot of times, many of us who've worked in security, and I will say, not they're not paying me to say this, but not with Semgrep. I think Semgrep is awesome, but with many companies, you buy something and it tells you that it's going to do this thing, actually a black box, and it doesn't have the context of your organization. So you're just stuck with this security tool that is very expensive and not giving you the insight you want. And so now when I'm talking to security vendors or other people in this space, I am trying to tell them like, you need to make it so that your product is easy to integrate, offers the ability, like API access is not a black box, and make sure you're solving something that isn't solvable by, asking an LLM to write, a cloud function. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Daniel, you're I guess more on the builder side of things. How do you feel like the LLMs and generative AI has been changing your approach to building software and open source?
Um, One thing I like to do here is try to imagine like the most extreme version. And the most extreme version of this is you have someone sit down and just riff with an AI about what it wants, what they want. And you're like, oh, and it would work like this. And the AI is like, oh, you mean like this? And you're like, no, not like that. Like it's a web interface, and it's got a mobile thing. And it's just like, oh, you mean like this? And so it's just this conversation. And then eventually it goes like this. And it's like, yeah, I think this is ready. Do you want me to build this and deploy it? Yes. And that sounds like super far away, but I don't think it's super far away. I think it's probably a lot closer. And what that does is it moves all the value to the idea combined with design sense and really just a strong focus on what the user needs. So people who are really good about asking those questions and just
Mhm.
coming up with good ideas end up being the ones who win. And the execution ends up falling on the AI.
Yeah. I would say something that I am thinking about too in this space is we're experiencing this at my company where access to a model like Claude allows people previously who have not been software engineers or even touched code to be able to deploy things that automate their work. And so we're seeing people in classically, like there's this collapse of like the non-technical or technical because anyone can be like, I talked to Claude and Claude talked me through how to, I mentioned Cloud Functions or set up a Lambda that now we don't need this marketing tool or now we don't need this. And I think one, that is incredible, but it's also a very interesting struggle for security teams because I think in the chat, M. Cohen is talking about like a lot of the knowledge that you get is from being in the trenches and like probably doing things wrong a couple times, but you have mentors, you have people on your team who are like, no, we use version control or like no, we do infrastructure as code here, we try to avoid click ops or like kind of these engineering best practices. And so it's like an interesting struggle for security teams because now you have 10 times the amount of people who can go set up a public facing box that may have your internal IP or PII on it. And so it's I think there's a lot more emphasis on preventative controls and guardrails while allowing people, it's like, yeah, it's again that implementation like paradox of letting people play with these tools, letting people imagine what the future could look like, but also making sure that you're not shooting yourself in the foot the process.
great point you bring up about how easy it is to spin things up. I was talking with some of our Semgrep users the last couple of months, and they were saying how they work at a company where there's sort of this mandate from the board, from the CEO, that like everyone needs to be using AI, and they're like, as a security team, we're kind of responsible for where is it? Are we using it right? Have we signed the correct enterprise data protection? And so like your point about guardrails is interesting, where they're trying to build like almost a proxy or something to sort of let developers go fast, let everyone play with this incredibly exciting technology, but do it in a way that security has the controls that they need.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Or at least the visibility.
Exactly. Daniel, there's so much data that's out there that I think has historically been just really hard to look at. I think about how many logs computers generate. Like, how do you see AI helping us there and kind of giving us more eyeballs? You talked briefly about having kind of a number of agents that can kind of do work for you all the time, but
Yeah. I'm calling this like a billion eyes or many eyes from like the open source community or something. But I'm kind of obsessed by the fact that there's just so much happening that's not being looked at. It's going by, and there's like 0.001% of it is being seen. One of my favorite things that's actually happening is nobody's looking at the asteroids or the meteors in the sky. It's basically backyard amateur people who are taking a picture of like a planet or a star, and they notice something move through it. And they get like on some forum somewhere and call someone up, and it's like, hey, Mindy, can you take a look at this, please? And they're like, oh yeah, that's real. We need to track that one. Thanks, Jim. And it's like, the sky is too big. There are too many meteors and nobody is looking. And it's the same if you have a large organization and you have terabytes or petabytes of logs happening and all these events happening, and you hire these teams, which are very small. And of course, we could use automation to find some of that stuff. But a much better way is to simply have more people looking. And when I say people, I mean thousands or tens of thousands or eventually billions of very small, very attentive, very smart agents who don't blink, and they don't get tired, and they don't get sick, and they don't take vacation. And so you can apply that to so many areas. One that's really cool that was related to a previous point is they could also teach. They could also be mentors for the people who are coming up in security. They could build them simulations. They could help answer any questions. They can give them guidance. They could be like, hey, did you check this log? Make sure you check this. And basically always be there to help, which is a big problem for a lot of people in security, to not have someone to ask because there just aren't enough people above them. So I'm really excited about this idea of simply not having as much fly under the radar, because almost everything will be able to have coverage.
Are you seeing the same thing, kind of, Jackie, where you're able to get much better coverage now that you have more of these powerful tools?
Yeah, I feel like cutting through the noise has always been kind of one of the big issues with working in threat detection, because you can't see everything. And there's so much, like, think of that matrix of like your known knowns and your like known unknowns. And like your known unknowns is like a big portion, but then there's your unknown unknowns, which are like the meteors that no one's seeing. And I do feel like we have this ability to, yeah, like again, like I keep saying, augment our ability for visibility. And I think one of the great things too is that, we talk about, just more logging is not helpful. Just more alerting or detections aren't helpful unless you have the ability to mean make from them. And I think that is also what we are getting more of an ability to do, is to really work through large corpuses of data and make meaning and connections faster than we were able to before.
Yeah, and I think this is an area where, in the security space, I think we often get a bad rap of kind of having tool spam. I think about like oftentimes opening lots and lots of automated PRs or kind of just annoying developers. And I remember I think Google had an interesting paper like 2014 era where it was like we have all these automated checks, but if we spam developers and they're like, this is false positive, this is useless, more than like 2% of the time, they actually just automatically turn this off because that signal to noise ratio is just so important to kind of not annoy humans. And so I'm pretty excited about how you can use LLMs to kind of prioritize and kind of understand the context of what's running where, what's the what's this code, is it intern's test project, is it running in production, to sort of just bring you a little bit of a priority inbox, because even the best funded security teams, it's just an overwhelming job to keep up with all the software that's being written and all the new attacks that come out all the time.
Yeah.
And we know that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think this is kind of the biggest thing. It also applies to the billion eyes as well. The most important thing that AI can do is actually deeply understand in real time exactly what's happening in the org. So, for example, you should always be able to ask, like, what is the latest thing that the CEO just put out? What is the latest thing what are the latest security initiatives? What's the biggest thing that happened in the last 5 minutes that could potentially affect our strategy? If the AI always knows the answer to this, then the very next piece of threat intel comes in. It has the context of the current org, right? So for example, let's just say that there was an announcement, hey, this company is now getting out of this space. They're not going to do cloud whatever anymore. Well, that just massively affected like so much of the team, so many of the OKRs just completely changed. Like a million different projects just got canceled. And like that's a type of thing that could take months or years for a human team to sort of adjust to. Whereas AI could be like, okay, well, now threat intel matters differently. It actually reprioritized our vulns list or whatever. So now everything changes. And if AI is aware, it can adjust to that so much quicker.
That real-time point is really interesting to me. And I think I'm trying to think through how we can, give the model more real-time context. Obviously, these large foundation models are continually being upgraded with kind of their knowledge of the world, but they're using RAGs or just context prompting. We've seen that being used effectively here. I was yesterday just sort of like trying to search for like when was our last performance review at our company, and it was a quick question, asked the LLM, came back and it summarized all the documents, and I was like blown away how much faster that was versus having to go and ask HR or some annoy a human with a trivial question. We've got an audience question here around what are your thoughts on kind of the emerging divide between companies that can kind of afford or maybe have access to the latest tooling and those are not? What are some of your thoughts there? Let's go with Daniel first.
Jackie, are you there? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I would say I'm really worried about this. I'm really worried that for individuals, but also for companies, that the data, the context available in various APIs from these different data brokers could be like really expensive. Because it's the feed that comes into a given AI system to allow that company to make a better and better decision. So it could be the latest intel, it could be the latest collection of OSINT, it could be the latest business intelligence, it could be just whatever. And let's say that you're a top tier company, a startup, with access to all the Silicon Valley connections and money and VCs, and you get discounts on these APIs that cost you millions of dollars. And those are being streamed into the best AI available, the pinnacle models, which maybe those cost a lot of money too. And then you have someone in the exact same space, but it's basically Jackie and me start a company and we come in here and we're like, oh, okay, so that's 140 grand a month for that API. So we go get the downgraded version. It's kind of the same, like you get similar results, but not really. And so the access to data and the access to better and better models and potentially the compute infrastructure to be able to run it internally as well, I think there might unfortunately be a massive gap between the best people and everyone else.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because when we think about the limits of AI models in the future, it's going to be limited on compute and the access to incredibly large, supercomputers, and the amount of energy it takes to run them. When I think on like the geopolitical scale, this is a huge concern for, which countries are going to be able to make use of the most advanced models, and continue to train models is going to be bounded on these, and then kind of cascading all the way down to individuals. How will this be gated, right? How will the future of access to this technology be gated? We could see in a very dystopian world, governments regulate this so individual citizens cannot have access, and it moves up to this is something that only a certain class, or we could think of kind of, I've heard the term technocracy. It's like in Silicon Valley, access to resources that you have is quite different. And I think it's really important to, like, for me to remember the privilege that I have, that I don't have limits on how much I can talk to Claude. I don't have limits on if I want to fine tune a model. That is not the state that most other people and security defenders in bootstrap budget in many different companies have access to at this point. And so I think there is this push on like, how can we make these models accessible and offer them in a way that is cost efficient for the work that is pro-social, which I would say defensive security work is pro-social. And if we don't offer access to this technology to defenders, we know that attackers will definitely get this, especially our well-funded AP style actors are definitely going to be having access to the best models and capabilities.
Totally.
Jackie, I'm curious for your kind of advice for audience listeners who are kind of trying to get these tools, inside their company, but they're kind of running into resistance from folks who are worried that they're going to have all their sensitive internal data, be used to train models, or like, what have you seen there?
Yeah, I think interesting one I've seen is existing tools. Like, we are currently fighting a battle, which is, somewhat unique to us, but I think may not be unique, in that every tool that we have suddenly has an AI capability, and a lot of them turn them on without letting you know. Or a lot of them make it very difficult for you to turn off the AI capability. And for us being a, company, we don't necessarily want our, I'm going to throw out an example like GitHub. We don't want to send our Copilot data automatically to OpenAI. That is like, kind of just like a baseline no-no on, but I think in companies scrambling to enact and make use of LLMs, there is this kind of rushing to feature deployment without this real understanding of the importance of an opt-out feature. I feel like I'm in the privileged position that if I want to bring an LLM to augmented tool, I will do that via APIs or natively. I don't need it in the tool I'm buying. But I think like we are seeing the hype train kind of force companies to roll AI support into their products quicker than we're thinking about what does it actually mean. And I think a lot of these companies too have a poor understanding of when is information going back to train models, inadvertently or not. So it is pretty challenging, I would say. I think Anthropic's position here is we offer our models via GCP, Vertex, and AWS Bedrock. And so that gives you the opportunity to use trusted cloud infrastructure and use our models without kind of questioning, like, how is this company, handling our data?
That's a great answer, and we've certainly been benefiting using Bedrock to run things and feel like, okay, everything's just inside the Amazon VPC. AI is just another tool we have.
We know this. This is like our walled garden. Like, yeah.
Exactly. What about you, Daniel? Do you have kind of thoughts on how folks can kind of make the case to leadership that, we need to start bringing these in and experimenting with LLMs in a responsible way?
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of, and this is a little bit too cheeky, so I don't actually believe it this strongly, but I'm going to go a little extra with it. It reminds me of people
Please.
who are like, I don't want to talk about my idea because someone might steal it. And it could be that submitting your idea and giving it to a cloud API and a cloud AI provider, that might allow you to actually make this product and get it to market faster. And the threat model for having this stolen is kind of crazy. Okay, an APT is somehow able to hack this provider, but they just go digging through it to find your business idea so they can go implement the business before you. And I'm like, okay, that's a whole lot of unlikely things happening in a row. Maybe it's better if you just use the tech and move faster in the business first. Now, there are certain things that's not the case. Like if it's like IP, if it's like the formula for Coke or something, you got to be careful there. But I think in a lot of cases, people are putting too much weight on this when they shouldn't be.
I think that's fair. And like a lot of where this comes from is concerns about compliance regulations and, being beholden to, if your data is leaving your trusted boundary, you may have to, report this or come under scrutiny from the FTC. Or I think a lot of this is rooted in this kind of maybe outdated thoughts about data governance and like, compliance regulation, which might be hamstringing us in a way that is preventing innovation, which maybe is used loosely there. But I'm going to keep my own thoughts about that.
Yep.
Jackie, I'm curious, like what keeps you up at night, with AI?
What keeps me up at night, honestly, is hacking on projects. I think I think one thing philosophically, which I get kind of that, like, if you can imagine the exploding brain meme about, is the limits of my own ability and cognition to imagine what AGI or will look like or think like or how it will affect. And so I feel like I am split to these two components. And one is, hacking on, I sometimes joke that my brain is a race car with bicycle brakes. So I like when I have a thought to be able to put it somewhere where it goes to be written down, like always leave a note. So I was hacking with artifacts on a way that if I talk to my Apple Notes, it creates a reminder or, goes to other places. And so I was using tool use for that. So on one hand, creating kind of like small things that improve my life. But on the other hand, I'm like grappling with these large existential, I do feel like we are on the precipice of a huge change in, I think, in humanity. And, part of that, yes, is that I work at an AI company, but part of that is just reading the writing on the wall, I feel like.
Great answer. Daniel, what about you?
I would say pretty similar to Jackie. I mean, I'm thinking about the human problems that we have. I'm trying to take a step back and isolate, like, what are actual human problems? Like, what are humans struggling with, separate from tech, maybe tech related, but mostly human related problems, like the inability to have conversations with ourselves and each other. And then seeing those human problems in one category and then the AI over here, and then keeping those very separate and saying, how can we get AI to help us with these, and not kind of merging them into like an AI first conversation. So I'm trying to just think along human first with AI being a tool.
Yeah. I'm curious, you kind of have a gut feeling on, do you think LLMs in the long term will be more beneficial to attackers or defenders? Maybe Jackie, let's start with you.
Yeah, question. I feel like I kind of want to call on another thing that I saw Daniel write about, where we are at this stage where we're kind of like and I might butcher this, so you can totally fix it up for me. But like, we're at this point where we're like looking into this kind of dark, like fog of war valley, and on the other side is either, you know, a Mad Max style wasteland or like an Elysium style, you know, we all get to be in Bridgerton, you know, just like
Yes.
having tea. It's not clear how we get to either of, I mean, we can imagine a lot of ways we can get Mad Max. Sometimes it feels like right now we are in a Mad Max world. But I think we focusing less on like attackers and defenders in our classic sense, I think, and more on like, how do we get to a future where humans do not have to take on the role of attacker and defender? Like, why do we have attackers and defenders?
I love that.
Yeah, but that is again kind of the like, you know, it's taking a big step back from my day-to-day work, which is very focused on attacking and defending.
I love the way you answered that, because it was presented as two options: attack or defend. And your answer is, oh well, we got balloons. Amazing. And your answer was, why is this the only paradigm that we have? Can we think of something better? And I love that.
No.
Yeah.
I'm going to give a much worse answer. I'm going to stay within the box, which is not a good thing. But I'm going to say, I think for low maturity defenders, attack is going to massively win. So if you're equally skilled with AI, I would say it's better for the defender. But the moment the defender's skill goes a little bit down, it's much better for the attacker. Mm-hmm. So for the next few years, I think the advantage is going to be with the attacker, because the defender is not able to fully leverage its context in the defense. As soon as the context going into defense gets much smoother and cleaner in real time, then their superior knowledge of what they're defending is going to help them be faster and better. But the moment that's not the case, if it falls to like 95% and the attacker is still at 99, they're going to beat them.
Well, yeah, I love the idea of, again, having like all these billion eyes that can help you, because, you know, as we always say in the security world, like you have attackers, they only have to be right once, you know, and they can break into your systems. Defenders, we got to be right all the time. And so, you know, the more we can kind of make the computer sweat, be the robotic system that, you know, has these guardrails and then, you know, says, hey, I need help. I don't know enough here. Come in, you know, bring a human in for that, you know, kind of more higher level investigation. I think the better for our industry.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about AI, you know, over the last 50 minutes. I'm curious if we, you know, just kind of go around the room and talk about like what do you think the next year, you know, for AI looks like, and what are you most passionate about? And I didn't realize a year is like, you know, an eternity in the space that's moving so quickly. I can start. I mean, I think for me, I was running across this really interesting concept of, you know, today we have, you know, as humans, we have kind of fast thinking and slow thinking. So, you know, this is like, what is 2 + 2? You just kind of pull that out of your memory. If you ask me to do long division, I'm gonna have to sit there with pencil and paper, or, you know, kind of really think hard. And I don't think we've gotten to the point with LLMs where they can kind of do that slower thinking, where you can be like, go spend an hour and kind of come back with, you know, a really insightful answer here. Of course, we've bridged this by giving access to tools. So, you know, when you ask an LLM to do long division, it can just pull out a calculator, you know, much faster, more powerful. So I'm kind of interested to see, you know, how we as an industry give more security tools, you know, things like Metasploit, Semgrep, other tools, you know, to these LLMs. And then also to watch the research, as I'm, you know, quite confident that the generative AI will eventually learn how to think and, you know, reason just like we do as humans. But maybe I'll pass over to you, Jackie.
Yeah, I think, well, I'm very excited. I feel like we're in this leapfrogging game of more and more advanced models coming out. And it's kind of, you know, anyone's bet on like, you know, when the next like GPT-5 will come out, or like when we will release, you know, our next big thinking model of like 3.5. So Anthropic uses the this idea of ASLs, which is AI safety levels, to kind of determine how we want to structure the preventative security and safety controls before we release a model. And it also kind of reasons out an ASL 3 level model is capable of this level of reasoning versus like, ASL 4 is like, kind of, smarter than humans. I know, Daniel, you have played with a lot of different paradigms about like the intelligence of models, but I think I'm very excited to see what that looks like. Even internally, we released Sonnet, our most advanced model, 3.5, and it was kind of this moment where I'm talking to it and I felt the difference in how it was speaking to me conversationally in this way that like I had not felt before. That was like this, like, whoa. So I'm just very excited to see, the new models that come out. And also, I mean, it's very exciting to be at Anthropic because we are doing this research into not only how can we create more powerful models, but how can we understand how they're doing what they're doing. And there's so much that we don't understand. And that came out like with the Claude Golden Gate Claude in clamping features and actually like peeking into the brain of a model and being able to kind of steer it in different directions. And so I'm very excited for more research there. I think within the next year we should see incredibly powerful models. I mean, just the rate at which we're innovating in this industry is really exciting.
Yeah, I would echo all of that. And I would say what I'm really excited about there is one of the providers is saying PhD level, which I think is pretty exciting, whatever that means. And then I think the jump from everything else to Sonnet 3.5 was pretty vast. And kind of the big prediction for 2025 in loose terms is that it's going to be as big as it was to go from GPT-3 to GPT-4. And that's a rough guess in just like magnitude, but that was a huge jump. I mean, everyone felt that at the end of what was it, 22? That was a huge jump. Like I wasn't even paying that close of attention to 3.
Same.
So yeah, such a massive jump. The thing I'm really excited about for the next year is actually the first few digital assistants, which is an AI that's kind of like a personal companion. And maybe this comes from Apple, maybe it comes from one of the pinnacle providers like Anthropic, having like this assistant attached to you. But the most important thing for that would be for it to understand your goals and your preferences and to never sleep. So when you go to sleep, it's collecting news for you. When you have 5 minutes between a call, it says, hey, do you want me to read the news for you? You're struggling with a problem, and maybe it's watching your screen. You're struggling with a problem. It's like, hey, do you want me to help you with this? So I'm imagining this for kids who have a permanent tutor. I mean, tutors and teachers and mentorship, this is a human problem. Like everyone needs this, and very few people have it. And to have that start to come out in 2025, I think would be remarkable.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. What advice do you have for folks who want to maybe break into this field or are starting to, look for jobs where they get to play with these exciting technology all the time? I know at Semgrep we're hiring. I'd love to have folks apply here. Curious, Jackie, I'm sure Anthropic's hiring, but any specific roles?
Yeah, we're hiring. Our security team is growing. My team is hiring detection response engineers. We're also looking for application security engineers. We're also looking for folks in like crisis and resiliency management for our offices. Anthropic is growing pretty rapidly. I would say for folks interested in breaking in, the 2 biggest things I can recommend are be voracious in learning and be curious. Use things like Claude, just ask all the questions that you have, investigate building, even toy problems. I think the key to being a great security engineer is a great engineer, understanding engineering principles, how to take things apart. I'd also say network, attending things like these, getting to know people, going to conferences. I won't speak for the entire industry, but I have kind of carved out a little corner of people who are approachable, friendly, kind, and willing with their time, and those people are out there in security.
That's great. And I can give
Yeah,
a plug for Daniel's newsletter if you haven't signed up for
Yes,
unsupervised learning, or I know he just released a new open source project called Substrate.
Substrate.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, those are pretty cool. The other thing I would say, I really like Jackie's answer. I would also add, follow a lot of AI people on YouTube because they're doing a lot of work. Newsletters. So TLDRSec is one newsletter you should be following from Clint Gibler. I've got a newsletter, Unsupervised Learning, but also YouTube. There are tons of people on YouTube putting out great content. And it's a good way because it's also kind of relaxing, but it'll get you hyped. So it's the type of thing you could do at the end of the evening, just see what the latest stuff is. And often they're tinkering with it, and it'll encourage you to go tinker as well.
Such a gold mine for people learning. Well, thank you both for your time.